formed in 10, we're joined by Damien Fitzpatrick, founder and CEO of Pillar Performance, an Australian-based elite-level micronutrition company redefining how athletes approach recovery, sleep, and performance. Since launching in 2021, Pillar has quickly built credibility within professional sports by focusing on evidence-led formulations and working closely with high-performance practitioners and teams. Today, we're talking about trust, testing, and what it really takes to build credibility within elite sports. With that, I'll hand over to my colleague, Senior Business Development Manager, Terence O'Rorke.
Kelly, many thanks. Damien, it's great to see you again, and thank you very much for offering to join our 10 in 10.
A pleasure to be here. Love chatting about this stuff, as you know, Terence.
Indeed. Damien, we've had the pleasure of working with your brand for quite a few years now, as Kelly said. You have a background as an elite rugby union player. So my first question, how did your relationship with sports supplements and the knowledge of banned substance testing lead you to create Pillar Performance?
Yeah, I think that's probably a pretty easy one for me. I mean, I was probably about as direct as it comes, coming from a professional sporting background. We were from the age of probably 17 when I was starting to kind of know that I would enter. Well, I was entering into the academy programs of professional teams while I was still at high school. They start educating, the league, particularly in the Australian rugby ranks. They start educating players from the minute you get into the program. I had probably known that there was risk in taking supplements. You start learning about supplementation, and then very quickly, if you're looking like you're going to go professional, the education very soon follows. Being a professional rugby player, I was super attuned to the risks that were going to come with supplementation directly. And I suppose then having that knowledge, understanding, and I think it was, we have built our huge, a huge part of our branding around having banned substance tested products. And, I'm really proud now that we are still probably one of the pioneers, particularly in this part of the world, where regulations are very different to UK, US, that category of micronutrition or, vitamins and minerals or supplements, depending where you are in the world. Very seldom do brands go into that space and have the products banned substance tested, because we know the fundamental, the big players in that space are big pharma companies, and they're worrying about preventative health, not so much performance. We set out to build a brand, and this was going to be one of the really key things that we wanted to try and solve, was banned substance testing, to give people and athletes, a safe, trusted platform to be able to use.
I mean, you mentioned that you received quite a lot of education from, as soon as you joined the sort of elite pathway in rugby union. And I'm very aware that the anti-doping authorities and Sports Integrity Australia have a very robust governance policy around supplements. So what is your perspective on the level of risk with regards to contamination? Do you think it's high? Do you think it's getting better? Do you think it's being managed better? Or do you think it will always be there?
I think it's becoming more aware. Do I think it's better or worse? I think there is higher risk these days for an athlete to have contamination, purely because of consumer behaviour shifting. As you know, we could go, I think 10, 15 years ago, you could go to a restaurant or a cafe with your teammates, your family, your friends, and order a smoothie, for example, and probably not have many options in there to have a smoothie with a whey protein isolate or creatine. Where we are now in Australia, which I do think is relatively advanced in terms of wellness and performance economy. A lot of our, standard cafes now have options where you can have, breakfast is obviously a big thing here in Australia. Protein smoothies are on the now. You can also plus creatine, plus collagen. And it is very easy for an athlete or someone who needs to have a very, very low risk tolerance to supplementation, to quickly forget that you're not, once you leave your training facility or your home and you're not buying the product yourself, you sometimes do forget. And we work with cafes now here in Australia that we are educating them to turn to Pillar products, because we know that they're situated so close to a professional sporting team's facility, and the players, they won't use the produce in that cafe purely because it's not banned substance tested. So I think that risk itself with consumers has grown massively, but I still think it is always risky. Like I think it's something like 1 in 3 supplements are contain a banned substance tested. I think in our category, it would be even higher considering the amount of botanicals that are involved in micronutrients, particularly the immunity products. So hugely risky and over the counter, just standard medicines as well. Like I think there is, as athletes, we're predisposed to trying to find a solution to get yourself back on the field, and the most innocent action, be it trying to take a cold and flu medicine, still I know to this day is what does slip up players. And I don't think there has been too many serious cases, but that's only through luck, not through lack of risk.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think the landscape for athletes these days is particularly challenging. It's not only supplements, it's what's a supplement, what's a fortified food, it's certain types of, as you said, over-the-counter medicines. I think there's even, risk associated with what we would just classify as normal foods. So with that in mind, how central is trust in the decision-making process around supplements when you are working with elite athletes and practitioners? Is it absolutely fundamental to them having that relationship with you?
Yeah, I think for us in Australia, have a vision. We want to be the trusted destination for athletes and across multiple categories. As I was mentioning, it's very rare that a brand can solve between health, performance, and let's say in competition products, your hydration, carb, fuels, this type of category. And there's certainly not one brand that can work across all three of those with a badge of approval and I suppose a very high trust of banned substance testing being taken care of. And that's kind of what we set out to do, was to be that destination for athletes. We're very fortunate the brand has scaled globally relatively quickly, and you can now find pill micronutrients on a lot of sports supplement shelves around the world. But here in Australia, it's a massive goal of the brand, to achieving that, to be able to have it across multi-category, because then we really do have that ear of the professional team, the dietitian. We hosted a lunch at our the gather round of the Australian Aussie Rules Dietitians Association as well, and we gathered 24 dietitians from that league of professional teams. And what we were really educating was, guys, we're going to continue to expand horizontally in terms of what we want to do from a product perspective. And you will know at every turn, a pillar product will have Informed Sport certification. And if it doesn't, it won't be long before it does, but it will definitely have a batch certificate. It'll only be because it's a very novel product, and we're still working with you guys to potentially get it done, but it won't be through lack of trying.
Great. I mean, I think in that explanation, Damien, you pretty much answered my next couple of questions, which is really good. And we very much do endorse with brands like yourselves to approach their business model with Informed Sport very much in mind. And we are here to support that, whether it's purely for a commercial plan, or it's in terms of quality, or it's in terms of building. So when you do interact with with elite sport and requirements for third-party certification, how much did that influence you from the very start? Was it literally, well, if we are going to go into this marketplace, we must have Informed Sport at the very beginning of this journey?
It was, yeah, I mean, as I said, I think I'm probably your gold star student in this field. The biggest gap, I mean, I always say that, Pillar was created for the athlete, but if I'm being really frank, it was actually created for the dietitian of these teams, because I myself really authentically was needing to take a certain class of product, be it the micronutrient side of the category. And one of the biggest pain barriers that myself and our team dietitian at the time had was that I was following research in terms of where I wanted to have my inflammation products, my omegas and my curcumins. And then when it came around to winter, when we were traveling a lot, I was obviously looking into different forms of immunity products as well. I was trying to match up, I suppose, the level of physical activity we were doing with where science was. And I felt there was still a gap in that even. So we had actually turned away from most of the over-the-counter brands here in Australia, and I started to look into brands in international markets that would sit very much in the clinical practitioner only, behind the doctor category. And I found some fantastic products there. There was some omegas coming out of Europe and Scandinavia, which would have been very, very beneficial for me who was needing a really high level of EPA. The biggest issue is that, none of those were banned substance tested. And when we tried to get the companies to look into it, it's a really easy answer. Professional sport is a very small market commercially. We don't see the value in going through that layer of, I suppose, of operations. It adds another complexity to supply chain. But for me, I was looking at the market. This was like I was on the final year of my career, and I actually took the bet that, yes, professional athletes maybe as a group, if you're trying to scale to a very large business, potentially is too small a market to turn the ship around. But I took the punt that I believe that where the modern consumer is going, this modern wellness consumer that is informed and dialed in, they know exactly what they need from a deep sleep. They're looking at their data-driven wearable. Everyone has their health attached to their arm. I took the belief that there'll be a lot of change within the world, but one of the things that won't change is there will still be an idolization behind professional athletes. There is always going to be an aspirational element behind professional sports. We're in awe of the physical ability, and to watch someone go out, dedicate their life to trying to pursue something. And I believe as people started to become more attuned to what they needed, there would be even more of a focus on, if it's good enough for them, I want it to be good enough for me, because I'm now looking into a performance-driven lifestyle. Into 2021, I thought that the broader market the consumer market was going to go there. I think probably at the time I might have been early, but I'm definitely seeing things start to turn the way I saw them kind of 5-6 years ago, because there is a huge wave of performance-driven mindsets, and this isn't just physical performance. We all know, like, there is a daily optimizer who wants to just perform on a daily basis, and those are the exact type of people that are now looking for this kind of supplements that the best in the world are taking. They want them because they're strong, they're clean, and they're safe. And if you've got a brand that has that, then they want it. And I just think some brands in the past potentially have kind of missed that run. And I think what we're going to see is that a lot are going to come over to it, because the market will start to demand.
Sure. No, that's very interesting. We hosted last month in southwest London with the Lawn Tennis Association, which is our national federation for tennis in the UK. We hosted our very first supplement safety conference, which was essentially a morning's conference for practitioners, so dietitians and nutritionists, as well as people from anti-doping. We had UK anti-doping there. We had several academics, etc. And a lot of the feedback from that was that while there has been a great deal done to try and improve the landscape for athletes, also for the dietitians, and also for the industry, there are still some things which aren't quite right. So what do you think the supplements industry is still falling short of in terms of transparency and trust? We know the marketing machine behind the supplements industry is very effective. It's vast. It's got a lot of money behind it. So do you think there are still some messages coming out from some brands that aren't as transparent and trustworthy as you'd like to see them?
Without talking ill of other brands, which is not what I want to do. But I think there's probably two main gaps in trust that still to this day brands make, and that is, let's just say, the pixie dusting effect of testing. I think it is more confusing and more dangerous for a brand to pick and choose which batches they test than to not test at all. And I think because of the marketing behind a lot of supplement companies, they want to have their cake and eat it too. The marketing team's like, oh, we want to go after that customer base. So, can we please get that logo, and you guys have found a great way to try and avoid this. But, there'll be a brand that will want to, have a range targeting athletes. So let's go and test that batch of products and potentially get it into that team for this partnership. But the product that's sitting on that shelf at that retailer for the average customer isn't the same one that's been tested, and it becomes really, really dangerous. I think there are, I also think the professional teams have something to say about that as well. Like, in terms of, like, I think if you're a professional team, you should have a mandate that, you shouldn't have a commercial partnership with a team that doesn't completely cover certification, not just batch testing, because essentially there is an assumption that if it is partnering with a professional sport, and you are a supplement, that it is tested, but that's not always the case. There'll be big dollars thrown around these teams. The team goes, look, the players can use the product as long as you test those batches. The brand goes, okay, that's not a problem. And then, the ones on the shelf, potentially, these are parents buying on behalf of you. They don't know the difference. And I just think, it's not illegal, but, does it create any further trust? Because we see it all the time. And is this batch tested? Is this batch of our customer service? Every batch is tested. And they go, oh, okay, that's great to know, because we've used X brand in the past that, doesn't test every batch. So we have to write in. I think that's one of the biggest misleading and probably one of the biggest causes of distrust still with athletes from supplement companies.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are some programs that do allow brands to certify products without that every batch testing, and it does create a certain uncertainty, and it gives them what we call the umbrella effect. So if they have one product either certified or tested, they try and use that to create the umbrella effect across their whole brand, which can be misleading and possibly lead to athletes or even consumers thinking automatically, well, that product's on the program, so these must be the same. Which is why we so much appreciate the likes of Pilar, committing to that every product, every batch being tested, which is providing the very highest levels of trust and protection. So on to the final question then, please, Damien. Do you think that there is a momentum enough now down in Australia and New Zealand and that part of the world whereby brands will need to do stuff differently to earn and maintain this level of trust, whether it's from elite sports or whether it's from the general consumer? We're certainly finding in the UK and other parts of Europe that the general consumer is also influencing brands. They are becoming much more savvy. They are looking at labels. They are looking at certification marks. They're looking at websites to influence their purchasing decision. And is this something which you think is starting to happen across Australia?
I think you're spot on. I think it'll be twofold. I think, well, I mean, even when it comes to informed sport, I think more and more brands are seeing quite a bit of fruit outside of Australia. And yes, it's a long way, or New Zealand perhaps, but it is a long way to export products. But informed sport is a truly global brand, I'd say, in supplement banned substance testing. I think there's a lot more appetite for brands to enter into foreign markets with a high level of credibility. I think Australia and New Zealand, for that matter, both countries have a very strong reputation in manufacturing and a really strong reputation in high performance as well in terms of population. I think both countries punch well above their weight in terms of global sport and I think you really did nail it. I think the end of the day, what is going to happen, whether it's here in Australia or other parts of the world, and I think Australia is, having visited the US and definitely in Central Europe, Australia is well ahead in terms of this new modern performance and wellness consumer. I think 5 years ago there was a movement, there was a group, a small population of Australia that understood kind of what resistance training for longevity was, zone 2 training for VO2 max testing, heart rate variability for your daily prep rate. Like, I think, as I said, like you nailed it. People are already so informed on ingredients. Before it was easy enough to talk about, let's just use a category that's pretty known to us. 10 years ago, it was very easy to say we do magnesium. Now, the amount of comments we get from people, oh, what forms of magnesium? I love this form. Like this whole knowledge base of a category has just grown. And I think because of that, what is just about what becomes as part of that knowledge is knowing what other brands are doing. So if there are brands leading the way that have gone to the effort to ban substance testing, people will learn that. They will understand, okay, what is that? They will then start to demand it of their other. It's happening right now. It is a snowball effect that we're definitely seeing here in Australia. Like there is there is a huge wave of momentum behind cleaning up the supplement aisle, I should say. And people now, there's a huge opportunity for challenger brands like ourselves to come into categories and talking to the biggest retailers now we've got in our country, they understand what's happening. Retailers in the US, also seeing them turn over a lot of product on shelf, firstly from an ingredient perspective, but then there's also a certification element as well. And you can see brands now, investing in their own research and clinical papers, because it's not good enough to just have amazing branding with great celebrity endorsers. You have to have the clinicals to back it up, because there'll be that portion of the population that trust the product until it has it. And that portion of your customer base is probably going to grow, because I think we're all pretty wary of the marketing machines in many categories now. So, with AI as well, it'll be much easier to kind of sift through the pretenders as well.
Very true. Damien, many thanks for your time. It's been fascinating getting that insight into not only your brand but also into the industry down in Australia. Again, we very much applaud you for your commitment to informed sport, and long may it continue. And we look forward to working closely with you in the future.
Oh, it's a pleasure to chat about this stuff. As I said, we wouldn't be where we are here in this part of the world without the support you guys have given us internationally. So looking forward to hopefully chatting again one day.
Great stuff, mate. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us for this month's episode of Informed in 10. If you want to take a deeper dive into any of the Informed certification programs or today's guest, please visit the Informed website at WeTestYouTrust.com. As always, make sure to subscribe to Informed in 10 on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube so you don't miss our next episode. Thanks for listening, and catch you next time.